Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. The meeting will be starting shortly. While we wait, let's learn more about Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.
Welcome to the Exeter Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting for the month of November. We have a couple of items this evening, 3 applications actually. Let me begin by introducing the board. To my far right, Ann Sermon. Next to her is Rick Thielbar, Esther Olson Murphy. To my far left is Martha Pennell, then Chris Merrill, and Laura Davies. My name is Bob Pryor. I'm the vice chair and will be serving as chair this evening in the absence of Kevin Baum.
You're going to be yelled at for your mic.
I'm going to be yelled at for my microphone. Here we are. Sorry. They're behind me. So, as I said earlier, the members of the board and town staff are required to wear masks. It is optional but suggested for everyone else in the room. There are some outside if anyone would like to take one. So, for Wednesday, November 17th, we have 2 items of new business. Before we get started with that, a couple of housekeeping details. Is Mr. Berkowitz here, or a representative? No? Okay. Then I was going to move that forward, but I don't need to if Elliot's not here. So we'll take care of that in a moment. The first is that there are 7 members of the board here this evening, an embarrassment of riches. Only 5 of us will be voting members this evening. The voting members would be Mr. Thielbar, Ms. Olson-Murphy, Ms. Davies, and myself, and I think the other 3 members are alternates. So would one of you like to vote on the first, the CKT Associates?
Makes no difference.
Again,
All right, Ms. Sermon, why don't you vote on the first, and
I'll vote on the last one.
you'll vote on the second? Mr. Merrill will vote on the second. Okay. With that out of the way, all members of the board can participate in the discussion, but only 5 of us are voting members. So, first of all, Mr. Passay, the application of CKT Associates for a variance from Article 4, Section 4.2, Schedule I, permitted uses to permit an age-restricted residential use for the proposed relocation of Building D in the Ray Farm Active Adult Community to be located on Ray Farmstead Road. The subject property is located in the C3 Epping Road Highway Commercial Zoning District. This is tax map parcel 47-8.1. I didn't know we had dots. And 47-9. This is ZBA case 21-12. Sir.
Thank you,
Just
Mr.
one
Pryor.
quick thing. I'm sorry. I
Sure.
should have brought this up before he opened up your case, but I might be leaving after the first case. You might need 2 alternates.
That's fine. We'll ask the alternates to stick around then.
Okay.
Thank you. Please, Mr. Passay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Justin Passay from DTC Lawyers in Exeter. Happy to be with you tonight. Thank you for your time. I'm joined tonight by John Schaffmaster and Bill Blackett from CKT Associates, who is the owner and applicant, as well as Denny Hamill from GM2 Engineering, who's the project engineer. For tonight, I'll do a quick presentation and overview of what the proposal is, followed by a more detailed description by Denny Hamill of the particulars associated with the proposal before the board tonight. Mr. Schaffmaster would like to make a statement, and then I'd like to close by just addressing the variance criteria itself. But just to summarize this case from the 20,000-foot view, what we are proposing to do is to take Building D, the 4th building in the Ray Farm project, which is situated on tax map 47, lot 8, which is depicted in green on the plan to your right. And Building D, as you see, is in the upper left corner of that plan. And the proposal is to relocate that building to the lower right of the plan, the orange building as you see. So we'll get into the particulars of what that means and what is required to accomplish that, the planning board relief that we'll have to obtain should we be fortunate to get the relief we're seeking here tonight from the ZBA, et cetera. But for now, that's the proposal. We're hoping to relocate the 4th building of this project. So to provide quickly just some context here, the original variance for this property was issued by this board back in 2014 to a different entity. It was an out-of-town entity called Calamar. It was for an age-restricted residential development. It was proposed as 1 building. It was going to be 116 apartments at the time. Willie Creek, John Schaffmaster's entity in 2017, permitted what is depicted on this and what is depicted in the approved site plan, which we provided as part of the materials. And that was 4 buildings total. 3 buildings were identical in size and shape. Building A, B, and C were identical as to size and shape. There were 4 stories, and each had 32 units. And 1 building, Building D, which is the one that we're proposing to relocate, had less than 32 units, had 20 units, essentially because the area that it was proposed was constrained by wetlands and the boundaries of the lot itself. As an update to the project, buildings A and B, as well as the clubhouse, are completed and built out and occupied. Building C is under construction. We anticipate completion of that building in the spring of 2022, and approximately 40% of those units have been sold already. So it's a very successful project. It's been a very smooth project as far as construction goes, which Mr. Schaffmaster will reference when he speaks. As part of the development that was approved by the planning board in 2017, there's a new town road, which is called Ray Farmstead Road. It's located on that plan sort of to the plan south. The limit of the town's acceptance of that road aligns with Building A. So the town road stops right where it accesses the project development, and thereafter there is no more town road. So In the course of building out this project, for a variety of reasons, which John will elaborate on, it became apparent that a relocation of Building D was more attractive. The idea now, the concept is to move it away from where it's located, which is in close proximity to Epping Road, close proximity to the mobile station, which is planned north on that plan, and to move it where it's depicted on that plan, that orange building. The idea is to essentially capture economies of scale, because the idea now is to build the exact same building. Building D, as proposed, is the same footprint, it's the same size. Instead of 3 stories, 20 units, it's 4 stories, 32 units. So it will be identical to the other 3 buildings, which are in construction or have already been constructed. Denny will get into the particulars of where it will be located and how it will be located in his discussion. To accomplish this, though, the proposal is to consolidate 3.99 acres. I'm just going to say 4 acres because it's close enough. So 4 acres of an upland area, which is right where that 4th building is now proposed to be, and to combine that 4 acres with the existing Ray Farm project property. That area, that upland area, will be where the new 4th building is located, and it's on that concept plan, which is also before you. The result is that the Ray Farm project in total will be essentially enlarged from 11.5 acres or so to 15.5 acres or so. But the density is actually going to decrease because only 12 units are being added by virtue of the 4th building, but 4 acres are being added. So we've provided the calculations there in our variance narrative that justify that conclusion. But certainly the project is going to be less dense because of this proposal. The nice thing, though, is that the remnant parcels, I mean, we're really talking about 2 specific lots that we'll be consolidating land from. The first is depicted in yellow outline there. That's tax map 47, lot 81. That's about 6.25 acres right now. It's very awkwardly shaped, as you can see. It's got frontage on Epping Road, but it also has a lot of frontage, almost 750 feet of frontage on Farmstead Road, which is now a town road. But then it narrows, and right in sort of the biggest area of the wetland, it's at its narrowest before opening up into the bulb area, as we refer to it in the application, which is an upland area where the new building is proposed. So that's lot 8.1, and from that lot, we're proposing to take a little over 3 acres in lot area from 8.1. To the south of that is tax map 47, lot 9. That's also Mr. Schaffmaster's property. That's a large tract, 55 acres in size. Also burdened by wetlands, much like 8.1, and the idea is to take about an acre from that area as well, and collectively those 4 acres would be, through planning board action, consolidated into the Ray Farm project. So that's an overview of the project. That's an overview of the 2 parcels. There is, in addition to the constraints I've already referenced with regards to the properties, 8.1 has a right-of-way over it, Mr. Carlisle's right-of-way. Russ Hilliard, the attorney for Mr. Carlisle, provided a letter and some information. If you recall, the concept that we initially provided to the board actually had the building sited closer to that right-of-way, and portions of the parking that were depicted on that plan were located within that easement area. And really, in response to that, in response to members of the existing association who desired to see a building that was further away, the design that's before you now was produced, which pushes the building further away, and really the only thing that is proposed to be in the easement area at all is the access, which is proposed to come from where Building C is now. So you can see on that plan, it's a dark gray driveway, which is coming from where the Building C is now down to where the new proposed Building D is. So we feel the plan addresses the concerns of the interested parties and is a good concept that advances the project in a way that's better suited for the property and for Mr. Schaffmaster than the original design. So I'm going to turn it over to Denny, who will get into more details. Obviously, if there are questions at this junction, I'm happy to answer them.
I have several, thank you. The first is that I want to clarify for the members of the board as well as the members of the public exactly why you're here this evening.
Sure.
The parcel was approved, I don't remember the exact date, for 116 units. And the reason that you're here is that you are now taking property from other zoning districts and putting them appending them onto this. And so the approval that is existing does not cover land that's being added on. So you're here, that's the specific relief that's being sought here. May I ask, and I don't have the original decision, I don't believe here, when was it? The original,
It was included in
I
the
gave the
packet.
minutes
Was
in
it?
the package, yeah.
oh, okay.
It was 2014.
2014, somebody
Correct.
can find for me. Did that decision specifically cite the number of units, and are you therefore officially requesting expansion in the number of units?
Correct. The Calamar decision from 2014 approved 116 units. And the zoning is all the same. Even though tax map 47 lot 9 has a bifurcated zone, all of it is in the C3. So the relevant portion is in the C3. Even the existing property where the Ray Farm project is now is in the C3. The same district as across the street for the Gateway project that was recently approved.
But the fact that the original decision that covers this development was only for 116 units, is that going to require a separate application and vote from us in order to go to 124?
I don't think so. That was the basis of this request. It was a request to have residential and to add 12 units to the original approval.
Okay.
We're essentially asking I mean, the density calculation it's straightforward because there's 12 units being added, but there's 4 acres being added, so.
No, I understand the calculation, it's just that your application didn't say anything about the additional units, at least in the part that I'm reading here, so I just wanted to make sure that that was articulated.
Certainly, the narrative explains in detail that we're looking for 12 more units, and that it's the issue is the economies of scale to build the exact same building. So 4 stories, 32 units, same thing as buildings A, B, and C, and that's where that 12 extra units come from.
Why don't you continue with your
Can I
presentation?
ask quickly?
Oh,
just,
Sure.
Is the engineer going to go over the property lines and stuff? Because-
Yes.
Okay, I'll wait. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hamlin.
Yes, please. I'm sorry.
I got it, thanks.
You know how we are, both of us.
Talk over each other?
For the record, my name is Dennis Hamill from GM2 Associates, and I'm the design engineer for this project all the way from the beginning. Previously, we were Camet Engineering, and we got bought out by GM2, but nonetheless, we're here, and I'm still here. So as far as the property lines, I know it's a little hard to see from that distance of where things are. The outline of the original project now is, follow my thing, it comes around like this, and this is the shape of the original project as it currently stands as approved. What we're adding on is this pink odd-shaped area here. Now, what Justin was talking about previously is this lot comes up here, and it used to do this. So it was this long thing and had like this little pork chop kind of thing at the end. So then we're adding a little piece from, this is the line between what was originally parcel A and parcel 9. So we're adding a little chunk of this to add that to get this building further away from building A and out of the easement for Mr. Carlisle. So that's the purpose or the reason for why it is where it is. Now, to get access to it, if we didn't have this access here, we would have to come up through here and potentially try and cross this portion of the perennial stream. And a much larger wetland area would be disturbed in doing so. Excuse me. So that's one of the reasons why this project here is not very suitable for, say, a separate commercial use, because getting there would be very difficult. With this process, it's coming across as a tiny little, intermittent stream there that we're crossing, very little wetland impact. So we'll probably put almost a bridge across it. Now, there to be no actual wetland impact, but we'll be going over it. So that's the gist of what's happening here. Now, just to give you an idea of how far this building is away from other buildings, from the closest corner of Building A to the closest corner of the relocation is 353 feet. Now, that's over a football field in length. That's quite a ways. From the closest part of this building to the closest parking lot is about 260 feet. So obviously, that's not a vertical structure, it's just a driveway. And then from this building to the original Building D is 380 feet. So it's really not a whole lot closer.
I'm sorry, what was the calculation from D, original location of D to,
The original location of D to the closest point of building A is 380 feet, and we're 53 feet this way.
okay.
It's only, what's that, 23 feet difference, 27 feet? So that's only your first down. So with this building in this location, we don't need any setback requirement, no setback waivers or any of those kind of things, where Building D over here did require setback waivers from wetlands, just because this was a very poorly drained soil and required a setback. And we got that little red line, you can't see it here, but about 10 to 15 feet into that building was the relief required to get that building in there for setback requirements. This one here meets all the setback requirements to the property line as well as to the wetlands, and then some. You can't see it here, but there is some buffer zone lines that are shown on there. So we have plenty of room to do stormwater and, excuse me, any other things we need to make this thing work. And it will be serviced by, there is city sewer coming up into here. We'll be able to connect to that with the water and sewer going this way. So it's totally self-sufficient as far as stormwater. It will be tying into the existing utilities, which are there, so there's no need to run additional utilities up Farmstead Road or across this wetland area. So it's going to be, pretty much, obviously, it's going to look exactly like the other building. So instead of seeing, say, a commercial building up here of some sort, you're going to see the same building, that's there now. And from the street, you never see it.
Where is the right-of-way for Mr. Carlisle?
Well, Mr. Carlisle's right away, before Ray Farmstead Road was there, Ray Farmstead Road was put in the same location as the right of way, up to this spot right about here. That's where it stops. Then this is the rest of the right of way for him to get access to his property here. That property is, totally landlocked. It's the only way you can get there. So,
So if
Are you
he
going to-
want to develop, he would use his right-of-way? Is that what I'm hearing?
well, I don't know all of the details of that easement, but I don't believe he has the right to build a road there. Mr. Shaftmaster gave the town the right to build this, and they sold that to because Mr. Shaftmaster owned the land under the easement, and he sold that to the town for $1, just up to this point. So Mr. Shaftmaster has to say is what gets developed in that easement. Mr. Kyla has a right to cross it, but that's it.
So in the submittal that came up last month, you ended up with 2 ways to access the new building. One is the one you've shown, and one is a continuation of the right-of-way tying into the existing road.
We've never shown one doing that for this building.
Well,
The access has always been from the extension of the drive past Building C and then across here.
okay,
Now, this parking area was located right over the easement. The center of the parking area, which would have been the aisle between the parking, would have given Mr. Kylell his access still across to get to his property.
okay.
Are you suggesting that the easement doesn't permit him to improve the property to a road?
Maybe Justin can speak to that.
I'm putting this up, and I'm sure I'll struggle for 5 minutes to take it down when Denny needs it again. So, Mr. Carlisle has it's the subject of a case from in the beginning part of the 2000s, and he has a private easement for a private right-of-way. So he can use that and he can improve it to access his lot as he deems fit at his expense, but there's no obligation for Mr. Shaftmaster to convey the fee interest, the land underneath the easement, to
So he
anyone.
could build a commercial driveway from the
Build a
end
road.
of Ray Farm Road to his property and build a commercial development back there potentially.
It would be a private road, and whether or not he could obtain the relief necessary for frontage and all of that for that development is something that beyond the scope of what we're talking about.
Right.
But he could improve that, it's a 50-foot private easement,
Okay,
and he can improve it at his expense.
yes. He'd
And
need
anything-
wetlands permits and everything else, but.
Right.
and anything that you're going to build on the easement is subject to change over time, should he wish to improve that easement. Is that correct?
Well, the way that we've depicted is that it wouldn't interfere with the use of the easement. If you remember the first concept, there was more infrastructure in the easement area, which we thought was consistent with the use, but we've been very transparent with Mr. Carlisle and with his lawyer. I've given him advanced copies of all of our filings so that he knows what we're doing, and we have to address this at the planning board. Certainly, it's going to be a planning issue. But for now, and particularly with the way that it's depicted on this plan, we think it's consistent with Mr. Carlisle's use and consistent with
Yeah.
a good project for us.
Okay.
So it seems, without reading the documents, that that's fine. Has the fire department looked at that circuity of travel to get to Building D? I mean, it seems rather difficult.
We have not been to the fire department
Okay.
as of yet. But Building C had a similar type of situation. It's just an extension of that. So we're going to be providing turnaround for the fire chief to get there. That's why you see this little extension of the parking area. That would be for a bigger, larger vehicle to turn around there without having to back out all the way out.
Approximately, what's the length of the road to get to the far end of the existing concrete for Building C, and how much are you adding to get to Building D?
From here to here? Is that what you-
From the end of the public road to Building C is approximately how far now?
Okay, if they say from here to there,
No,
No.
the road, via the road,
via this road?
yes.
Okay, so this is the access drive. It's not really a road.
Approximately distance.
Let me just get the right scale here. This is 60. From the end of the driveway there to the beginning of this parking area is about 290 feet.
And from the end of the public road to the end of the existing pavement on C. I can come up and show you if I'm not being clear. Trying to figure out how much you're adding and for what. Right now, the end of the public road is here.
Right about there.
From here to here, via that route is approximately how far?
Ooh, that's a little harder to measure there because it's not straight. So we're about 500, 700, 17. It's about 1,820 feet from here to here.
Just out of curiosity, Barb, what is the typical length of a cul-de-sac that they don't,
1,250 feet is the most that the planning board likes to, so the fire department
okay,
likes to
just,
see.
just a,
For a cul-de-sac, it's 1,200 feet.
okay,
1,200.
okay, just wondering.
Yeah.
All right,
You're already
thanks.
way over that and adding more.
I mean, that has been waived on occasion.
Sure.
by the Planning board, so that would be an issue that would be addressed between the fire department and the planning board when it gets. to
Sure.
that phase.
Okay.
And this obviously will require site plan.
Yeah, and that's not our role, I just was
Technical review.
looking
Okay.
at it and thinking about it and
Yeah,
wondered.
yeah. Okay,
Okay,
all right, please continue, sir.
Is there-
Well, I don't have a whole lot more to say,
Okay.
other than, where Building D was. You had a great view of the mobile station, so it would not have been a great spot for residents in that building
Are
to
there
see
any other
there.
questions from members of the board?
So is it possible for you to provide a second entrance by extending the road from where it's the town along the right-of-way?
It's physically possible, yes. There is wetland crossings and a perennial stream crossing, which are sensitive areas, for getting permits to do that. But, for private use, for public ways, it's a different story. The state looks at things a little differently for a public way. But for a private way, you got to minimize or go around if you can.
So, but where your driveway is a private way,
Yes.
so you would not have to meet the construction requirements of the,
Well, the road design would not be a whole lot different. The public way would probably be 2 feet wider than what we're proposing for our private drive.
okay.
This construction of the gravel base and all that's going to be the same.
You just gain a lot of the issue that Bob was talking about, because now you've got a hell of a long drive to get all wrapped around, and the new people coming in are going to add to the traffic flow along that long route. Whereas if you continued an access to so that in essence you'd have a circle and that everybody could access it both ways, you'd end up with a much better system in terms of your own.
If I may be so bold, that's not the plan that's before us, and we need to take action on the plan that's before us.
Okay.
We're not the planning board.
They may end up talking about that
Yeah, they
later.
will. They will,
So,
if it gets there. Any other questions for
can I
the
just
engineer? Laura?
just recap the situation, just to make sure I've got it correctly? So the green outlined area is the original site, and the lot line adjustment will be borrowing from 2 lots that are owned by a related party. Okay. That's all I wanted to clear.
Mr. Passe?
Thank you, Jenny. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Schaffmaster, but I want to make clear that we're all appreciating the context and the scope of the review here and what we anticipate having to do with the planning board. So we're here for the use. I mean, we are asking to do a residential use in the C3 district in that space, utilizing pieces of 2 lots and consolidating those pieces with the existing project. That's what we're here to talk about. That is a concept plan. I think it's a good concept plan, but as the board, I think, is acknowledging, this has to go through technical review. All of the town departments have to look at it. It has to go through site review. And these concerns, these issues, which are legitimate from the board, will be vetted and thoroughly reviewed by the planning board. And if we need relief, we need relief. If there needs to be a workaround will be engineered. But I just wanted to make sure that we're focused on the actual use relief, which is the reason we're here. I'm going to turn it over briefly to Mr. Schaffmaster just to make a quick statement, but then I'll come back and address the variance criteria.
I'm John Schaffmaster. I've owned this land and another 50 or 60 or 70 acres since the early 70s, when I think it was called the Epping Road Development Corporation. I built my warehouse from my leather business here in 1972, and over time, the Development Association, or whatever the official name was, every time they needed to build something or improve their water tank or something like that, they needed to sell land, and I ended up buying land to support the development of this end of town, actually. So I've held on to this land for almost, it's 50 years. As Justin described to you, Calamar came in and put a plan on the map for 116 units, which was actually an L-shaped building. It was surprising because it was in wetlands, but that had nothing to do with the variance, the zoning change or whatever it's called. I then attempted to sell. Over the years, I ended up, besides my family leather business, I got into the outlet mall business, and I built outlet malls across the country. From 1980, I started in Kittery in 1980, and I built outlet malls for 15 years, and to all the way out to the West Coast, California, Seattle, Phoenix, Las Vegas, and so forth. That was a primary business of mine. But I'd never built any residential units. In any event, when the Calamar deal fell through, they had 3 sites that they were looking at: Bedford, New Hampshire, Derry, New Hampshire, and here. And it was sort of like a race, and the first 2 got permitted quicker than here. And this project was very problematic between wetlands and rocks and so forth and so on. And they dropped out of effectively an option, and a cohort of Justin's was smart enough to include the fact that if they dropped out, I received any planning or approvals that they had gotten along the way went to me as the landowner, and that's how I ended up with this project. My first choice was to sell the property. Eric Cates built Sterling Hill. He's a Haverhill kid. I'm a Haverhill kid. I knew his father and grandfather, and Eric was going to do a deal here, and I was going to just sell him the lot, and he would proceed. And he looked at it for about 6 months, and then he came to me and said, look, I could ask for an option, but I'm not going to do this. It's too difficult. The site work is horrible, and there's a whole bunch of problems. So I proceeded. It's been a trying project. But the Building D is really not a good building. From a location point of view, As Justin described, Building D is the only building that required a variance, a waiver, actually, I guess it's called, a waiver in terms of setbacks from wetlands. That land, well, one, our request is to net increase 12 units, but that land will not be ever used for development. I will put that into open space. The current plan is to put a dog walking, not a walking area, actually an enclosed fenced area for the residents of the community. They seem to like that idea, so we anticipate just putting a dog area in there for walking dogs and so forth. But that land will never be developed, and it's a swap, so it'll be open space effectively going forward. This building makes a lot more sense, and as Justin has described, it's the same footprint. This will be the fourth in the similar building. I'm actually pretty proud of the fact that and profitability is not an issue for the board here, but I kind of got my feet wet building residential, and the first building and the clubhouse were over budget, and I'm clawing my way back, but I think that the consensus is that it's a really nice project. It's been beneficial to the town. The development department here is pleased with it, and the inhabitants that have come into town, obviously, it's 55 and over, no children in the school districts, and so forth and so on. I think this building is perfectly in keeping with what we have done before. We have a very good group of residents that have purchased from me, and I guess I would just appreciate if the town saw fit to allow this variance so that I can just add a final building. It's a swap with 12 additional units. I know my pal, Tom Monahan, received a variance for 220 unit residential unit right across the street off of 27, and that project is in C3 also, the exact same zoning that's here. So I'm hopeful that the 12 units won't be an issue, and that I can complete the project to the 4 building limit, not limit, my internal limit that we had originally perceived it to be. I guess that's my story.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. If it pleases the board, I'll turn to the variance criteria. As the board knows, the core considerations in any variance application are uniqueness of the property and reasonableness of the use. And I just want to make 2 sort of very foundational points that I'll reference a couple times in my presentation about those 2 issues. These are unique properties, and the use is abundantly reasonable because of the uniqueness of the properties. This property, as we've pointed out, has frontage on Epping Road, has frontage on Farmstead Road, and then it narrows down right where the wetlands are before it opens up into this bulb area that is uplands, okay? So very awkwardly sized, small, 6 acres where it abuts a 55-acre parcel and larger parcels around it. And then the same is true sort of in the inverse for this property. It's much larger than any of the properties, but like the property next to it, Lot 9 is constrained by the wetlands. To get up to this area, there is going to be significant wetland and environmental impact to get from Epping Road or from the existing Farmstead Road through these wetlands area. The best concept to develop this upland area is by far to access it from the existing project. It minimizes environmental impact, and that's why the uniqueness of the property lends itself to sort of this conclusion about the reasonableness of the use. But the other main consideration is the use that the remnant parcels will continue to have. So once that subdivision occurs and the consolidation occurs, you're still going to have on lot 8.1, that yellow area, the whole upland area still located in the C3, still perfectly viable for future commercial use, should that come to fruition. And the same is true for lot 9 below. You avoid the impact of going through the wetlands to get to that upland, but the vast majority of the 55 acres of lot 9 remain open and viable for future C3 development. So it's the best of both worlds. It's allowing a reasonable development of that upland area without the corresponding environmental impact, while simultaneously preserving future development on the remnant parcels that will be left behind after the consolidation. So I just wanted to make that sort of foundational point before turning to the specific criteria. As the board is aware, the first and second variance criteria are that the variance will not be contrary to the public interest or the spirit of the ordinance. The Supreme Court has indicated that zoning boards of adjustment should take those two criteria together. And the question really there is whether or not the proposal conflicts to a marked degree with the zoning ordinance. And to answer that question, zoning boards of adjustment look at the language of the zoning ordinance itself, but also consider two questions from the case law, those being whether or not the proposal will alter the essential character of the neighborhood and whether the proposal will threaten the public health, safety, and welfare. The table of uses doesn't have an express purpose provision, but the law tells us to look at the general purpose of the zoning ordinance. In this case, the general purpose of the zoning ordinance is to lessen congestion in the streets, secure safety from fires, panic, and other dangers, promote health and general welfare, provide adequate light and air, prevent overcrowding of land, avoid undue concentration of population, and facilitate adequate provision of transportation, water, sewage, parks, and other requirements. Sort of common sense dictates that the point of the C3 district is to promote and facilitate reasonable development. Here, as we outline in our narrative, the proposal really advances these general purposes of the zoning ordinance. The relocation will accomplish better light and air for Building D. It's going to accomplish overall less density for the project, which is a good thing in the public interest. It prevents overcrowding of land and undue concentration, and it's good for the environment. And because it's good for the environment, because it avoids these impacts to the wetlands, as I've detailed, as we have detailed, that is in the public benefit. We are instead accessing via a driveway from Building C with far less impact. It will, of course, require planning board review, conservation commission review, but the environmental impacts themselves are far less than what would be required if we were to access this upland area from the Farmstead Road or from Epping Road. So it's good for the environment. That's good for the public in general. By virtue of these things, we are promoting really the core considerations of the zoning ordinance as I've described them. And we're also promoting the zoning ordinance by, as I've said, making available these remnant parcels to be utilized consistent with the C3 zoning ordinance in the areas of those lots that makes the most sense. It's most logical to develop 8.1, that yellow area, close to Epping Road and close to Farmstead Road without impacting the wetlands to get to the back, just like it's most logical to develop Lot 9, that 55-acre tract, closer to Epping Road in the upland areas without crossing the sensitive environmental areas. So I would suggest that not only does it not conflict with the zoning ordinance, the proposal is actually consistent with the express provisions of the zoning ordinance. With regards to the case law tests, we would submit that this does not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. We're talking about adding the fourth building, which will be identical to the other three buildings on the property. It's otherwise surrounded at this point by unimproved property, and for that reason will be exactly consistent with the character of the neighborhood. And it will not threaten the public health and safety. It's really the opposite. It's protecting the public health and safety by avoiding impacts that would otherwise be required if you were to access that area from Epping Road or Farmstead Road. So we would submit on this information, as we've detailed in the narrative, that the first two prongs of the variance criteria are met. The third criteria is whether substantial justice is done by the variance. Here we would say the answer to that is a resounding yes. The guiding rule here is that any loss to the individual that is not outweighed by a gain to the general public is an injustice. Really, I guess foundationally, there must be some gain to the general public from denying the variance that outweighs the loss to the applicant from his denial. Here, the public gains nothing from denying this variance. On the contrary, granting the variance is in the public's interest for the reasons that we have articulated. We are promoting reasonable development of an upland area without all the corresponding negative effects that would be associated with trying to get to that same area through the wetlands. So this is a win-win, and we would submit on that information that this third prong has been satisfied. The fourth criteria is that the proposal will not diminish surrounding property values. We received a copy of a document that was provided to the board, I guess, yesterday, which concludes that in the estimation of the submitter, who owns a unit in Building A, facing sort of the back and facing where we propose to put Building D, that their property values will be affected. We disagree with that assertion. There's a couple things to note in that context, and Bill Blackett's here from CKT to the extent that more information is available. But the price of these units, since they've started to be developed in 2018 and 2019, have gone considerably up by 30–40%. That is the trajectory of these units. When people buy units in these types of developments, they anticipate seeing other buildings. In this case, the condominium, which is expressly referenced in every deed to every unit that has been sold, the declaration of that condominium reserves the right to utilize this exact area in future development. So everybody who bought property in this development was on notice that this area could be developed. But beyond that, we're talking about a site distance of 350 feet at least, which is consistent basically with the distance between Building A and where Building D was proposed to be. So we would say that common sense just dictates this finding that surrounding property values will not be diminished by virtue of just the exact consistency of the use with what is already existing on the site. And then everyone's favorite, the hardship criteria. The question here is whether literal enforcement of the provisions of the zoning ordinance will result in an unnecessary hardship. The question is whether due and owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish it from others in the area, no fair substantial relationship exists between the general public purposes of the ordinance provision in question and its application to the property. And there's a requirement, obviously, that the board find that the proposed use is reasonable. The question really here is, does it make sense to apply this zoning ordinance to this property under the unique circumstances that are present? Here, both properties in question, map 47 lot 8.1 and map 47 lot 9, are unique for the reasons I've indicated. They have this ability to accommodate the proposal by virtue of the disparate and sort of isolated upland in the back. They both are burdened by significant wetlands in the areas that you would have to get through to get to them. 8.1 is small. It's awkwardly configured. Correspondingly, lot 9 is huge and has the same burdened wetlands on it. The topography is a challenge. The ledge on the property is a challenge. So I would say that both of these properties are unique for this criteria. So that first portion is met. The second question is whether or not the purpose of the ordinance is being advanced by applying it to the property in question in light of its unique conditions. And we would say that the answer is no. Again, the purpose of the ordinance, as I explained, is to lessen congestion, promote health and general welfare, provide adequate light and air, prevent overcrowding, avoid undue concentration in population. For the reasons I've already stated, this proposal will accomplish all of those things. It doesn't conflict with those purposes. It is consistent with those purposes because there'll be less density, less congestion, better light, less concentration, and importantly, we are preserving for future development those areas of the lots in questions which are most appropriate for commercial development. So here, denying the variance will not promote the ordinance purposes, and for that reason, the fifth and final variance criteria has been satisfied. I also think that the second variance criteria is met here, the second test under the variance criteria, which basically requires the board to find that the special conditions basically mean that there's no reasonable use and a variance has to be given to provide a reasonable use. Here, the only logical and viable and environmentally sensitive way to get to this upland area of these two properties is as proposed through the existing development. It doesn't make sense otherwise to go through lot 8.1 through that massive wetland area to get there, and it doesn't make sense to access the same area over lot 9. So we would submit that actually this is a rare case where both tests under the hardship criteria are satisfied. So thank you for your indulgence in the time. Certainly we're able to answer any questions if the board has them.
Thank you, Mr. Passay. Is there anything preventing you from building Building D where it's currently located?
Anything that prevents it?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Are there any other questions from members of the board for the applicant before he, nope, he's already left.
Just got an extra squad in, thank you.
Not a problem. Your health is my concern.
I know.
Okay.
Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
At this time, we're going to open this up to the members of the public. And I noticed there are quite a few members of the public here. So I'll just ask people to, whoever would like, approach the microphones. Please state your name and your location and why you're here. And let's keep in mind that this is only about the use on this particular parcel. That's what we're here to decide, not the location of the roadways or any of that. As I tried to articulate a little earlier, that's something that is decided at the planning board level after you go through the hurdle of the zoning board, which has to decide whether in fact it's okay to even have this type of use in this zone. So if anyone would like to address the board, please feel free to step up and let her rip.
Name and,
I think I said that,
did
didn't I?
you?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I hope I said
Sorry.
that.
Hi,
Good evening.
good evening. My name is Anthony Liberti. I reside at 7 Willie Creek Road, Unit 202A in Building A. My wife and I moved here in December of 2019. We were the number 6th or 7th resident in the building.
Again, your last name, sir?
Liberti, Liburdi.
Thank you.
Full disclosure, I am a member of the Board of Directors of Ray Farm Associate. I am not here speaking on behalf of the board. I am here speaking on behalf of myself and my wife.
Okay.
We came to Exeter in 2019. As I said, it'll be 2 years, December 6th. The developer has been nothing but responsible in the buildings in response to the residents. He met with us 3 weeks ago and satisfied most of our questions as to the property and why he's moving the building. And I am in favor, my wife and I are in favor of his petition to change the zoning. So, like I said, I'm very proud to live in Exeter. My property, as far as depreciation goes, I can tell you that I did some numbers yesterday. I watched the sales prices. In 2 years, my property has appreciated 36%. That's a hell of a return on my money. So, again, my wife and I, Diane, are in favor of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir.
My name is Marty Kennedy. I live at 7 Willie Creek Road, Ray Farm.
Sorry, what building is that?
7, building 7 L, I'm sorry, building.
Building A?
A.
There's 7 buildings?
I'm sorry.
Where?
It's building A.
No.
You sneaking some in on us there? Come on. Building A.
Building A.
Sir.
Yes. My concern with the original proposal was the applicant placed the parking lot and the proposed connection from Building C onto what I'll call this disputed 50-foot wide easement. The revised plan, which is shown tonight, now shows the parking lot pushed back off the easement. But I'm not sure that fully addresses my concerns. The reason I say disputed easement is that, as I understand it, Mr. Kyla, the owner of Lot 12, the one to the back, plans to, at some point, develop that property with access provided through that easement. It's also my understanding, and I could be wrong, that the town views this easement as an opportunity to provide access to that back lot for reasons of economic development. Yet, Mr. Schaffmaster, the applicant, is telling us, the residents, that that's probably not going to happen. Now, please understand that the residents of Ray Farm are more than just abutters here. The applicant is asking that 4 acres of this lot 8.1 be consolidated into our lot, the lot that we own. When Mr. Schaffmaster sells the final unit, we, the residents of Ray Farm, will own this lot and this disputed easement. I'd ask that, prior to granting this variance, I think the town needs to make it clear to the residents of Ray Farm what the intentions are for this easement. Can traffic from Mr. Carlisle's, development use Willie Creek Road to access Ray Farmstead Road? If so,
That's a serious safety concern, as Willie Creek Road was not designed to accommodate that type of traffic. If, however, the plan is to extend Ray Farmstead Road to access Mr. Carlisle's property, which the revised plan now accommodates, the residents of Ray Farm need to be made aware of that, which that's not what we're being told at this point. Again, if you approve the variance and the lot consolidation, we become the owners of this additional 4 acres. And we don't want to be in a battle for years to come with Mr. Carlisle or with the town with respect to what the legal, implications are of this easement. And I would also say if Ray Farmstead Road is going to be extended, I guess I would ask, why does the applicant need to build a connector road from Building C? The relocated Building D, as shown in this plan, could have access off the extended Ray Farmstead Road, which would, by the way, would reduce the number of trees that would need to be removed and would eliminate, one of the wetland crossings. I would also say that, as all of you know, these parcels along Epping Road were zoned commercial to stimulate economic growth, which in turn results in increased traffic. But, if you continue to provide variances for residential uses in a commercial zone, I think you need to consider the provisions for pedestrian and safety mobility. Today, we who live at Ray Farm, we take our lives in our hands trying to cross Epping Road. It's very dangerous to get across Epping Road. Increasing the number of residential units doesn't promote safety, but rather increases the chances of someone getting seriously injured or killed crossing Epping Road.
Do you mean as a pedestrian?
As a pedestrian,
Okay.
as a pedestrian. And I would say that, any approval of, this variance that would increase the number of residents in this zone should be conditioned on the installation of a pedestrian traffic signal out at Epping Road. And lastly, I would also say any approval should also be conditioned on that the applicant cannot come back later and request approval to build another building on the previous location of where the old building D is. So with that, just thank you for considering the interest of the residents of Ray Farm.
Thank you. There's one thing that I can clear up for you, most of what you said I appreciate. It's the right-of-way is not disputed. It's a right-of-way. It's a legal right-of-way. You call it disputed right-of-way. It's not. It's a right-of-way. And the Carlisle property is accessed only through this right-of-way. So for that to be developed, then it is going to require that there be access across this right-of-way. The second thing I wanted to say is that what you call, which is not on the map, and I want to, Willie Creek?
Willie Creek Road is the internal road.
That is not a public road, that's a private road. So development of the Carlisle property would not result in traffic on Willie Creek Road because that's a private road. It would result in additional traffic on Ray Farmstead Road and Epping Road, of course. But it would not, you have a private road and that is a private road. As long as it's a private road, you have the right to control it. So thank you very much.
And I believe the easement pre-existed this development by some length of time.
Yeah, significant,
So it was existing condition when you bought,
Right.
everybody bought in,
Yeah,
not
right.
just you, everybody.
Right.
Okay.
Anyone else like to speak, sir?
My name is Doug Bernat. I live at 7 Willie Creek Road. I'm a resident of Ray Farm. And Jerry Rossetti and I are partners. We live there. And first, I just want to say that we agree with Marty's position in the sense that for us, for the residents to take over the new parcel, then, as you've already said, the right-of-way is Mr. Carlisle's to do with as he sees fit, to give access to his property. And I just don't think it's in the interest of the residents of Ray Farm to end absorbing that in the future, okay? Our concerns are a little bit different. Jerry and I were one of the first people to purchase a condominium. And I did submit a letter and dropped it off with Barbara yesterday. I'm not
We have
sure.
it.
I'm not sure that everybody's had a chance to read it. So if you don't mind, could I read the letter?
Well,
Yeah,
actually,
take-
the members of the board have had access to it, and so guess I'd prefer if you didn't read the whole letter, if that's all right.
Okay, it'll
Because
take
we have read it, so if you'd like to summarize for us.
Okay, I'll summarize.
I'm not trying to cut you off, I'm just saying that we
It
do
would be
have,
like 3 minutes to read the letter, but,
as you wish, sir.
okay. All right, so all I'm saying is we bought the unit, we're in Unit 407. I did enclose some pictures
Yeah.
of our view, and so at any rate, what I said is we had paid a premium for the unit for several reasons. One of them is the view that we have looking out our property. We're virtually looking at a forest and unspoiled land. And the second reason was the existing plot plan that said that the buildings B, C, and D were going to be north of the unit that we bought. And furthermore, that building D would be the furthest from our unit, all right? So the point I'm trying to make is that's one of the reasons we paid a premium. I'm uncomfortable, I would have been more comfortable just reading this.
Go right
And I'm
ahead.
sorry,
No,
okay?
go right ahead.
Because now, that's what I was trying to avoid, is just stammering, and that's not working out. All right, so, yeah, it's not a comfortable forum for me, so that's,
Ah, you're doing fine.
I apologize. So again, the reasons that we selected the unit is first, the view from the windows, the unspoiled woodlands, et cetera, and the representations by the developer that was not going to change, all right? Then secondly, we did understand that there was going to be buildings B, C, and D, but the unit that we purchased at a premium price was the absolute furthest from those buildings. It is now and always would be, all right? So that was part of the consideration, and I understand that's not before you. I'm just trying to set the table for our feelings on this. But furthermore, our unit is in the southeast corner of Building A, so when you look over there, we are the absolute closest to the new proposed D, as opposed to being the farthest from that building. And so, obviously, that means that we'll be the closest to all the construction activity, which is going to be removing trees, clearing, blasting, excavation, and road construction. And so once that is done, we're also going to be the closest to the new building, all right? So it is just interesting to note that in the application, the applicant does point out the benefits, and I'm quoting here, the relocation of Building D will benefit the mobile gas station property as well, which will continue to enjoy a vegetated buffer from the Ray Farm property. One of our concerns simply is that's what we have right now, is a vegetated buffer from the Ray Farm property, and we'd like to keep that. That's not necessarily before you, but one of the things, so we are opposed to this because in part, we want to retain this vegetated buffer, but we're opposed to the application for several reasons that are before you. And the applicant says, and I quote, "The proposal will not diminish surrounding property values." The applicant has offered only one sentence in the document to support that contention, which states, "Given the nature of the existing Ray Farm project and the fact that the relocated Building D will be otherwise surrounded by unimproved vacant land, no surrounding properties will suffer a diminution of value as a result of granting the variance as a matter of common sense." All right, so our position, conversely, is, as a matter of common sense, that to convert the unimproved vacant land that abuts our property to a construction site, which will require taking down trees, clearing, blasting, excavation, road construction, and general building activities, will certainly diminish the value of our property. Furthermore, as a matter of common sense, it's our position that placing a 4-story building with 32 units on the unimproved vacant land that abuts our property will diminish the value of our property. And lastly, it's also, it's possible that the applicant's request to increase the total number of units to 32 from 20 would reduce the value of other properties, of the existing properties, all right? Last, the second reason that we're opposed to the application is and I'm quoting here, "Our right to the undisturbed use and enjoyment of our property will be severely compromised by the unit's proximity to the tree removal, the clearing, the blasting, the excavation, the road construction, and the general building activities." Obviously, simple things like sitting on the deck or trying for us to try to work remotely, be on the phone, are going to be very difficult. So while quiet enjoyment is not one of the conditions, I guess, that's being considered, would like to think that that could get some consideration by the board, all right? So I'm sorry, again, for reading that and taking the time to do that, but we do, I certainly, Jerry and I do appreciate the fact that you've let us make this presentation, and we appreciate whatever consideration you'll give our concerns.
Thank you very much, sir, I appreciate it. Ma'am?
Yes, my name is Rosemary DeMarco. I live at 24 Willie Creek, which is Building B. I moved in last April. I have been very happy here. I approve of the plans that Mr. Schaffmaster has. I have no problem with it at all, so I would like to speak that I am in favor of his plans.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Adriana Christopher. My husband Peter Christopher and I both are in favor of the plan that's put in front of you.
And you're where?
We live in Building A.
A
We're
as
in
well.
Unit 305. We
Okay.
would face the woods. And we think the building there would be a benefit for that building instead of a different kind of building that might be built there. We also are very happy with the buildings that they have. We think it's a wonderful environment to live in. And we think the builder has done a fantastic job.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much. Anyone else? With that, I'm going to close the public session. Thank you very much for speaking. I appreciate it. And are there any, would you like to comment?
Just very briefly, Mr. Chair.
Please.
So first, with regards to Mr. Kennedy's comments, certainly we view these as planning board type considerations, and as I said in our presentation, we have been very transparent and collaborative, really, with Russ Hilliard and Mr. Carlisle to give them every bit of information that we've provided to you and to talk about this. And we know we've got to talk about this and we've got to get through these issues at the planning board. So that's the first issue. I think all of the issues raised by Mr. Kennedy in his statements will be addressed at the planning board in our planning type considerations. So that's that. With regards to the second abutter, sir, I'm sorry if I didn't catch your name, but really there are concerns about the property values, and I referenced this briefly, but 4 primary points. The first is that, as another person testified to, this area of the property is zoned C3. So this use, identical to the other 3 buildings in the development already, is the best possible thing that could go into this area. That's point number 1. Number 2, the building's gonna be 350 feet away from Building A, which is the same approximate distance between Building A and the proposed Building D that was originally approved. So roughly approximate in distance from the existing Building A. Number 3 is that, as I said, in every single deed that was conveyed for every single unit that has been conveyed in the Ray Farm project, there is a reference to the condominium declaration. The condominium declaration, which is a public document at the registry, specifically calls out this precise area as area that can be added to the condominium by the declarant. So everyone who buys property at the Ray Farm project is on notice that this specific area could be incorporated into the condominium at some point in the future. The last point, and the most important one, is that the market analysis, the market data, doesn't support the conclusion that there'll be any diminution in property values. And for that, I'm just going to very briefly turn it over to Bill Blackett, who has some prescient data that he can share with the board about market value.
Hi, I'm Bill Blackett. I'm the CFO for Mr. Schaffmaster, and I have all kinds of data in front of me to support that the value of the real estate is going up and will not be diminished. The phase 1, the average selling price was $448,000. A phase B was $480,000, and the third phase, building C, is at $566,000, and we've already sold 14 under. We have 13 under contract and 1 more almost under contract. So that's a 26% increase from building A up to building C. And building D, if we were going to put building D right now, I talked to our real estate agent today, and we would be putting the top floors at $700,000. And Doug and Jerry bought theirs for $490,000. So I can't see that the market is going down. And for arm's
How big are
length.
these units?
The average is about 1,700 square feet.
Somebody want to buy a house on 6 acres on Pickpocket Road?
And one arm's length recent transaction is Unit 301, Building A, was a resale, and that was bought in March of 2020 for $466,000, and they sold it a couple weeks ago for $605,000. And that's on the same side as Doug and Jerry as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I ask him a question?
Absolutely.
Do you
Merrill,
think,
you might want to come back up to the microphone, sir.
do you think by adding open lots open area to the left of Ray Farm Road, is that what we're calling it? Would help you improve your real estate explanations, estimates?
Can you ask that differently? I'm not.
You mean where D is originally
No,
supposed to be?
we're adding the extra lot, and we're gonna keep that as open land.
Yeah.
Do you think that that will add to their real estate portfolio by having open land on the other side?
Are you
And
talking about this area here? That will
the
improve?
yellow,
Okay.
No, the yellow's good, the yellow is subject to development. The yellow's gonna not be added to the parcel.
Right.
what is gonna be added to the parcel?
Only the chunk in red.
We're,
Pink section.
I thought we were gonna keep the yellow as,
That's a commercially
commercial.
zoned.
It's commercial.
you just want somebody to buy your house.
This area is gonna be added, the yellow's gonna be a separate, continue to be a separate parcel.
So that's gonna have nothing to do with what we're talking about now.
This is gonna be added extra open land that is gonna be part of this property.
What about this piece, actually?
So,
Is that being added to the subject development or no? I-
Ms. Davies, what was the question? Is what area going to be added to the development?
If you're just turning on off of Epping Road onto Ray Farm Drive, the immediate left, that roughly rectangular area, that's a lot of wetlands, what's happening with that?
That remains its own piece.
Okay.
Yep, that
So
remains.
still a commercially zoned parcel, still
With
a
frontage
part,
on both Epping and Ray Farmstead Road. and
Yes.
okay. I
it is
didn't know if
available
that's
for
what you were
development. Yeah.
referring to.
so the yellow triangle is gonna stay commercial.
Correct.
So where A is where A was supposed to be, is gonna be an open lot.
D, building D, yes.
So that
This
will
becomes open land as it is now.
stay. Okay,
That's
so
not
that's what we're saying, will stay open land.
Will stay open land.
But
Okay.
where the relocated D and parking would have remained part of a commercial lot
Right.
Yes.
if this
Yes,
alteration
that
in
could be
plan.
commercially developed, but they would have to cross and improve Ray Farmstead
Or
Road.
come to it
perhaps
from
get
another
there.
direction, yeah.
Or from another direction.
So I guess I'm looking at this, one of these exhibits that were provided that indicated that there was a future extension of Commerce Way that might both access Mr. Carlisle's parcel and this area in question.
Which exhibit are you on?
9,
9.
is that,
This is that plan that you're referring to here.
I believe so, yes.
Yes. So, yeah, so what you're seeing here, this is an existing grove in the commercial development over here. The hockey rink is here. That extends to here with a cul-de-sac. You got a cell tower right here. So you could potentially extend that into Carlisle's property to give him access, and then this wouldn't be needed to get up there, this part right here. But that's way down the road, and that's got to do a lot of things to happen.
Speculative, there's no existing easement or
Yeah, so-
agreement to
And
do
I do show
so.
a potential connection here for maybe circulation reasons or something of that nature.
And that would be out of everything you're proposing now.
That, yeah, 'cause that, the land we're showing developing is right here, so.
Okay, so that would have no effect, you wouldn't have to change anything, or,
And that's, just to be clear, that's totally conceptual. That was just put together to depict potential access down the road as an alternative to the TIF road as it's sort of commonly understood.
But at some point in the future, if that concept were to come to pass, this area where the proposed relocation for Building D could be developed with a commercial use. Is that that's my impression of what this exhibit tells me.
So it's C3 property, so it could be,
It's zoned commercial.
it's zoned commercial.
So the access doesn't exist now, but there's at least a thought that it could exist sometime. Okay, just wanted to.
Well, the same easement that reaches the Carlisle property would cover that as well.
Does it? Is it an easement or is it just a concept?
It's just a concept. There's
Okay,
no
there's no
property rights
easement.
associated with
This
that.
easement would cover, this parcel down here, this upland here could be accessed via the same easement that covers part of the
True,
Carlisle property.
true. But it would require the wetlands crossing and so
It would.
forth. Yes,
It would.
okay. Just trying to
Interesting.
weigh the trade-off.
Mr. Passe, anything else, sir?
I think so.
sir.
Yes, I would like to kind of address a couple of Doug's concerns. I have had two meetings with over 30, closer to 40 inhabitants, owners at Ray Farm about my plans. There was concern about the first drawing, and we addressed that by moving it away and so forth to provide more separation. But I'm particularly concerned in some of two of Doug's comments, which I find very disingenuous, because he's talking about noise and boulders and blasting and so forth. In the second meeting, because this was a meeting of essentially the condominium owners, not a condo association meeting. But I actually had my site work guy give me a bid on bringing in, doing any work on this building, coming in off Commerce Way, which I own that land, going by the cell tower, and doing all of the construction work from behind, and not going through any of the existing Ray Farm roadways or anything else. And the cost was $74,000 to do that, to eliminate dust, noise, road issues with heavy equipment and so forth and so on. So I'm really quite disappointed in Doug raising this now as an issue, because that issue was addressed. The second thing, in terms of value, the Building D where it is now, and I'll take the responsibility of the blame for this. If you notice,
Can you take the microphone with you, please?
if you notice,
It's all right. You want to sit here?
these nice little lines, and when this was designed, I didn't realize there was a mobile station back here. And there is a mobile station back here. And it's lit up pretty much 24 hours a day. And I think this was before the ordinance of downward lighting and so forth and so on. And in point of fact, this Building D abuts right on that corner and fronts, for the people in the back of these units, the Building D fronts the mobile station. And in terms of value, and I explained this also, and if you all disagree with it, I'm pretty good at what I do. And this building will be lesser valued units because of its location. It's going to be abutting and have half the units facing the mobile station with bright lights on all night. And I'm not a computer guy and a Zillow guy and all this kind of stuff, but what's going to happen, and these will be sold at less money. It's a very simple real estate game. Something doesn't sell at full price, what do you do to sell it? You sell it at a lesser price. And this will be known as part of Ray Farm, and these units will be sold at lesser money, and I explained that to all of the residents. And in point of fact, that's a given. There's going to be confusion in the market, and this wonderful gain that people have had on a terrific project is going to be nullified, and I would suggest that it's going to impact negatively the resale value of these kind of properties. And the final thing, which I find incredibly ingenuous, when we were leaving the first meeting, Doug came to me on the way out. Actually, he came back in the building and said to me, I'm sorry about this. This is a selfish thing I'm doing because of my view. I have the absolute right to take these trees down. And I represented to all of the people in my development that I would not do that. And I am not going to do that. So I really am disappointed in his comments.
I think it's really important that we maintain not only a civil tone, but we not attempt to victimize anyone here this evening. Please sit down, sir. I think it's really important that we not attempt to victimize anybody here, especially in a public forum. So I thank you. I think we're all set with that for this evening. Is there anything else?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to close the public session. Board is going to move to deliberations. It's about 8:15. Would anyone like to take a break before we do that? On the board, is everybody all set? Very good. I'm sorry it ended up that way, folks. That was not a good way to end it. So we have before us a decision regarding a use that is going to require substantial work outside of the context of this board in terms of technical review. As far as the length of the road is concerned, it's going to require planning board approval for the lot line adjustments. So all we have to address here is whether it is appropriate to have a residential use on a C3 parcel that is not currently zoned for that or does not currently qualify under the variance that was granted in 2014, I think, for the abutting parcel where A, B, and C already exist and where D was planned. I will open this up to the board and ask if anyone would like to begin the discussion. Ms. Sermon.
Mr. Chair, thank you. And I'm glad you netted it out that way, and Mr. Passay did a really good job. Can everybody hear me? I feel so muffled. Sorry. And then you're right, that just instinctively, and I know Mr. Schaffmaster's done an awesome job doing all kinds of development in this town. It just does go against the grain that we are, and it's been done before, and we continue to make C3 properties on Epping Road residential. And I just want to address it really quickly because other folks brought it up, and it really goes to the heart of this matter. This is probably the one reason where it will make sense, so I see after the presentation why it's being done this way, but I want to address the fact that the folks that have the concerns about mixing residential and commercial, you can kind of see it's a slippery slope. It can be a slippery slope. So whatever this board votes tonight, I just want to be on the record that the notion, I was heavily involved in the whole notion of economic development out on Epping Road in the last 5, 6, 7, 10 years, the whole TIF district, all of that. So it just does go against the grain every time boards turn commercial zones into residential. But it's there. Now it's there. And Mr. Schaffmaster has done his fabulous job out there. And I have walked those lands, and they really are tough. There's a lot of wetland. There's a lot of strange configurations. So so I just want people to be aware of that fact that it really is a rough place to develop. I think most of it going forward should be commercial, but understanding this situation, I think he's done the best job anyone could, and I agree that it should be, I think that location is far superior to where it was. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. You just made me look, because my memory was failing on it, and I found it interesting that the vote was 3-2, and Ms. Pennell and I voted against allowing residential on that property at all. So those of you who do like living there shouldn't be happy with me, because I said, no, there shouldn't be residences there. It should continue to be commercial.
Right.
And it should continue to be commercial, although in 2014 it was a different road than it is now as well. It certainly was. Other members of the board like to address the matter before us? If not, I would ask someone to go through the variance criteria for us. I think it's really important that we articulate each of the 5 variance criteria. We'll all talk, but would somebody like to
Can I just,
take responsibility there?
before we go through the criteria, just kind of,
Right
so
there.
we're talking about a change in use for the additional area that is the subject of the lot line adjustment.
Correct.
So that's really the only matter that we're dealing with tonight. Okay.
We are being also asked, because the 2014 acceptance, I believe, does specify, or the 2014 application, which was approved,
Specify the number.
specified the numbered. So I want to make sure that we do articulate whether or not we agree on the increase in the number of units as well. I mean, I certainly understand financially why it is in Mr. Schaffmaster's benefit to increase the number of units from 116 to 124, I think is the delta there is 8 units. I certainly understand that, but it is something that needs to be discussed, since the original application specified the number of units, and it is being increased. So I'd like to make sure that we dot that I across that T.
I think it's increased by 12.
Increase is 12, thank you. Mr. Thielbar, you have
You
your
want it?
blue sheet out?
You want me to go through it?
I'd love someone to go through it. I just want to make sure that we discuss each one separately, please.
Okay, yes, and, well, to that extent, 1 and 2 are discussed concurrently.
Correct.
And as we've seen from the presentation, there doesn't appear to be very much negative side and a fairly substantial improvement. The land that we're talking about is basically an island. And while it's perfectly fine land, it's very difficult to access it in any other way. And we've got a productive use of the land as an option. So I think as far as being in the public interest, it certainly isn't negative to the public interest, and the spirit of the ordinance is observed.
I would add something to that if I would, if you don't mind, Mr. Thilbar, which is that land, if not developed under Building D, remains in commercial zone, could be developed, and while it is expensive, and while it would be difficult to access, it is not impossible to access that piece of property. And that particular part, that protrusion, or whatever we're calling it, pork chop off of the lot, is, while difficult to access, could be developed commercially. And I believe it is in the best interests of the existing owners of properties in Building A, B, and C to abut a further building on that property similar to their own, rather than a commercial.
Good point.
Which is, while difficult and expensive, within the realm of possibility.
Okay.
And maybe not sooner, but probably later, it would eventually be developed.
I think that that's true. We can see how development has gone. 3 is substantial justice is done. And I'm hard pressed to really see a downside to the proposal. And it's clearly benefits the owner, but the applicant, but it's a positive in almost any other way you look at it. You've got an additional section of land that's going to stay as it is now, and that's the part of the project that we all drive by. So that's a benefit to the rest of the community.
And when we consider harm to the general public, that also includes the people who own units in who own condominiums there. And I think that deserves a little bit of attention here. People who do live in A, B, and C will own in common, as Mr. Schaffmaster says, when the last property is sold, they will own in common all of the land that underlies the property. And that is, they are increasing the amount, roughly 3 or 4?
Almost 4 acres.
3.99 acres, I think. 3.9 something acres. They will own more land. There will be more of them, but they will own more land. I think that actually increases the value of the units by having not only this property be developed non-commercially, rather residential rather than commercial.
Well,
I actually think it benefits the residents.
So, right, but also I now no longer need to address number 4.
It is separate. They're close relatives there. Yeah. No, right. Good. Yeah. Go ahead. All right. So is everybody okay on 3?
3 is what?
3 is substantial justice is done.
Yep.
Yeah. We seem to be okay on 1, 2, and 3. Okay, Mr. Thilbar.
And the points you raised are true. The project it's when you're discussing value, everybody has a different way of looking at value, and there may be some folks who think that there is a lost value, but the point that it was unrealistic to believe that the land in question was forever going to stay nice and green is unfortunate when that's not apparently going to happen if this project goes ahead. So I think we could argue all for days on either side, but there's not, in my mind, sufficient evidence that the is a significant loss in value.
I suppose if one was to try to sell one of the properties during the construction phase, that might be a temporary setback.
Well-
But I think that in the long term, this is actually going to be beneficial to the residents of of existing buildings A, B, and C.
So there were 2 points raised. One was that just the idea of more units would potentially lower value. And I just don't agree with that at all as a valuation professional and specialist. This is a successful project, and it's already a dense multi-unit project, and a few more units isn't going to change the unit values, individual unit values, just based on numbers. And the other thing is the proximity, and there's a good amount of distance between all of the construction, the new construction or additional construction from Building D and the existing Building A. I do think that there will be disruption to all 3 buildings during construction if construction is on the existing internal roadways. If it's brought in from the other direction, then they will be saved all of that. But I've, in the course of my work, currently doing extensive research on the impact of a highway on residential property values in southern New Hampshire, and the proximity is so much closer, and it's very hard to find, I mean, unless it's immediate, it's very hard to find that it diminishes property values. And this is far from immediate. There'll still be, I don't think they'll see it once it's done. They may hear it during construction, but I don't think that it will really impact the values long-term, and the construction phase will be maybe uncomfortable for everybody. It may not, depending on which way they come in, but
Well, it
there
certainly.
would have been construction if Building D stayed where it was originally proposed to be anyway, so.
Well, and it's certainly not going to be more disruptive than the construction of B, C, going during the purchasing of each of the 4
Right.
ongoing units, so it's.
Right.
I hope your analysis and your thoughts on that provide some comfort to the people who already live in A, B, and C. It should.
I hope so. I mean, I genuinely spent quite a bit of time doing research on what increased traffic and proximity does to the backside of a single-family residence and other smaller multi-unit residences. And I haven't found that unless it's an immediate impact with direct visibility and measurable sound differences, that there's any impact on value. Now,
Mr. Thielbar, everybody's favorite, number 5.
Well, we've talked about that some. So the original location limits the capacity and is not in a particularly good area, relatively speaking. The land that is to be used is also relatively difficult to access, and here's a way to productively use it. I think that everything on these sites has hardships driven by the water. So I think we could say that there are hardships there, and the net value of the project would be enhanced by addressing the hardships the way they have.
Hardship is a difficult one here, in my mind at least. We have to frame this in the context of the parcel as proposed, not the parcel as exists right now, but the parcel as proposed, which includes the existing Ray Farm development plus the addition of 3.99 acres to the south, no matter where those are coming from, two other parcels. So is there hardship on the newly shaped or designed parcel? And the answer is yes. Getting to that upland portion is extremely difficult, and the nature of that, however many acres, it will end up being 16 odd, I think. I think the conditions of the property do create, the special conditions on the property do create a hardship, which is purely access to that 3.99 acres that are being appended to the original development.
I think our responsibility is to consider whether the existing parcel has a hardship that requires the relief to allow the new proposal. And in that case, if we look at it that way, the existing, or the previous location of Building D would be less than ideal, in my opinion. And the 24/7 lighting and stuff. I found it kind of interesting that Mr. Schaffmaster's owned land there for 50 years, didn't know that the mobile station was there, but...
He's a shell guy, what can I tell you?
But anyway, I do agree that that's not the best location on the site, and that it potentially would pose more of a hazard to the values of the other buildings by dragging down property values. I thought that was a reasonably valid point.
I was wondering your thoughts on that.
Yeah, because those units will not be as appealing as the rest of the development if they stayed close to Epping Road and in that existing location.
That Building D also has that issue with it built on the wetland. They had to get relief, that 10-foot relief on the wetland, so that's...
And that's another
It shows the hardship anyways to get Building D, and they had to have
yes.
other considerations taken that they won't need on the new, should they get the new uplands use.
Any further consideration or discussion of the 5 points as Mr. Thielbar has laid them out? I'll accept a motion.
I move that we accept the application of CKT Associates for a variance from Article 4, Section 4.2, Schedule I, permitted use to permit an age-restricted residential use for the proposed relocation of Building D in the Ray Farms active adult community to be located on the Ray Farms Road as shown in the submitted documents, with the understanding that the project will go to the planning board.
So moved. Any second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. I believe it is also appropriate that we add a comment to the approval, should it be granted, articulating that the number of units is also expanded. And somebody can give me the exact language on that, please, from what to what.
So I would, I know we didn't vote on that, but I would propose an amendment to add on a statement that we would also be granting an increase in the number of units from 116 units to 128 units.
Is there a second to Laura's amendment?
I second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion of the amendment that Laura has proposed?
Thank you.
Hearing none, I'll ask for a vote on the amendment. On what we're doing is adding to Mr. Thilbar's motion a statement that the number of units is being increased. All in favor of the amendment, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Amendment passes. We now have an amended motion before us. Any discussion of the motion as amended? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor of the motion as amended, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Passes 5-0. Let the trees stand, please. Thank you all very much. I appreciate your attendance this evening and your thoughts and your words.
We do value the input. Yeah, I think it can be part
To
of the
Ms.
record.
McAvoy,
Thank you.
not to me, to him. I understand. I get it, but I didn't want it aired here.
I do have a question.
Thank you.
Before you go. Is there any
Okay.
way you could put
This goes away.
I'm going to call for a 5-minute break while we clear the room and reset. Okay,
Not really
Ms.
up
Summers?
to him. It's
Yes,
up to
please.
the statement.
I understand it.
Get in line, Gilbert.
Okay, just hurry up.
they would like to have something a little bit larger than what an accessory dwelling unit would otherwise allow, because that's a fairly small square footage. What they are thinking about doing instead is to, if you look at the variance plan, put a proposed dwelling in the location that's there, in that kind of the little area that juts out onto to Ridgewood. And the proposed size of that would be no larger than 2,128 square feet. In other words, no longer or no larger than 56 by 38. We've also included a kind of a building envelope here, and regardless of what the ultimate exact location or size would be, it would certainly conform with the setbacks and obviously things like building coverage and height and so forth. So that is, in essence, what we are proposing to do and why we are proposing to do it. And I would now like to turn to the variance criteria themselves.
If I may.
Sure.
Thank you. Are you proposing a lot line adjustment? Are you going to separate this into a separate lot?
No. This is not a request for a subdivision. We are simply requesting the variance relief that we are calling for is to allow 2 principal dwellings on 1 lot.
Okay.
Does that become a condominium, basically?
It could. It doesn't have to, however.
What happens to the other house if they, I mean, what would you do? So you have a lot with 2 houses on it?
That's correct. So just to back up a bit here, the zoning ordinance for this particular zone calls for only 1 principal dwelling lot unit on one principal dwelling on a lot. We are proposing to have 2 principal dwellings on a lot. Now, at some point, that could become a condominium form of ownership, but it doesn't have to be. That would be an issue that the owners could determine for themselves at a later point in time. They would continue to have the principal dwelling be a principal dwelling, possibly to rent that out to a family member, or possibly at some point in the future to have that become a condominium form of ownership and sold as a second unit. But the idea would be that basically it's too big for them right now. They like the lot, they want to be able to continue to be there, but they want to be in a smaller facility, and the existing dwelling could be utilized very nicely by say a family with kids or something that would have need for more space.
Have you done the analysis, Ms. Summers? Would the proposed structure, which would have access off of Ridgewood Terrace, because I do happen to know the property quite well over many years, and there's no way to have access to that house via High Street. So the access, I can see it even says proposed driveway on Ridgewood Terrace. Would it meet all of the size, area, lot coverage, setback requirements of a single-family dwelling?
That is correct, and we have that in the materials. First of all, one is allowed to have 2 driveways on a single lot, and as a matter of fact, the property that is next door also has 2 driveways on a single lot. In addition to that,
Which project?
This would be map 70, lot 120, the Forsyth property.
Yeah, that's
I'm sorry. Forsyth, got it. Okay, fine.
Okay.
Yep.
So what we actually did.
Karen, Ms. Summers,
Yes.
to me, this looks like a repackaging of almost an identical proposal that was rejected 3 or 4 years ago.
Approximately April 16th, 2019.
The application before you in 2019 was for frontage relief. because there's only 90 feet of frontage on Ridgewood Terrace.
Absolutely.
And that was done in connection with a subdivision proposal. We are not here tonight seeking a subdivision. We are here tonight seeking permission to have 2 dwelling units on a single lot.
Okay,
So in fact, there isn't enough frontage for a single-family home on Ridgewood Terrace.
That's correct, if that was going to be a separate lot.
Got it. The way I had phrased my question was, if this was a separate building, does it meet all of the criteria? It does, and you said it does. It actually doesn't. It doesn't have enough frontage.
If it was a separate lot, that's correct.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is the way I phrased it.
Oh, sorry, I didn't
That's all right.
I
That's
didn't
all right.
catch that.
If this was a separate building, would it meet all of the criteria? No, it would not. It doesn't have enough frontage.
Yeah,
Right,
but
it's got 90 when it needs 100. Got it.
But
Okay.
again, I do want to just clarify that the other half of the answer is that it would conform to all of the setbacks, building coverage, open space, height, and so forth.
So the point is that if we give the permission to build this, it cannot be separated out as a separate parcel without seeking further relief, which has already been rejected.
In its current configuration, that's correct, because there is not adequate frontage.
Got it. Sorry, we've interrupted, please.
No, that's all right, that's all right. So as I started to say, and I think I had just started in on the variance criteria, but hopefully I've clarified things a bit.
Yeah, we talked about it's okay to have 2 driveways.
Right.
We got that far.
So, turning to the public interest criteria, the purpose of this ordinance, it seems to me, to require only one principal dwelling on a single, on a lot, would be to prevent the overcrowding on land and perhaps excess population and so forth. And that's the underlying purpose when we go about our analysis of the public interest. So with that in mind, of course, the first element of the public interest is to look at whether or not there's going to be an alteration of the essential character of the neighborhood. And in this case, there will not be. The neighborhood is comprised of single-family homes. What we are proposing here is to simply have 2 single-family homes, separate, detached, in the same neighborhood, and they both will be on a lot which is, in the aggregate, is well-sized to support both of those. So in that regard, there is no alteration of the essential character of the property. In addition to that, there's no public safety issues here. This is going to be a relatively small house, approximately 2,000 square feet. As I've said before, this is going to conform to all of the necessary building coverage and so forth on the property, so there won't be any issues with overcrowding on the land. And because it is going to be fairly small, there's not going to be an excess amount of population in this house, which would cause additional traffic concerns and the like.
That stands as of now.
Pardon me?
That stands as of now.
Well, no, because the size of the house, I mean, currently, there's a house on the property with 3 bedrooms. If
You're
this,
talking on High Street.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
That's fine.
If the second dwelling were to be included on this, obviously, it's not yet been designed, but I would suspect it's going to be a 2-bedroom house. So I think what we're talking about then is, roughly, and I again, I don't want to pin them down because they haven't designed the house,
Right.
but I think it's fair to think that it's going to be 2 bedrooms. So we're looking at a 5-bedroom property on 1.7 acres, which is really not really unreasonable to expect in terms of the number of people there.
So we're not expecting people using the other road in excess of what your bedrooms would allow. Is that what we're-
Well, I would characterize it a little bit differently. I would say that the, assuming that there is a driveway on High and a driveway on Ridgewood, that the amount of traffic would be consistent with 5
Right, but
bedrooms.
Ridgewood wouldn't get the same amount if you put that 3-story house on Ridgewood as opposed to their small house, is what I'm asking.
I'm not sure I follow what the question is.
We're trying to get their applicant is gonna build a small house. It's only gonna be like 2 bedrooms.
Yeah,
So Ridgewood would not have kids and everything else probably going down as if,
I think that's pretty likely based upon what we're
two-bedroom.
talking about. And the larger house would continue to use the High Street driveway.
okay.
Okay. Hope that
I
makes
have a
sense.
question. Not to get too into the weeds, but what's the address then? Do they share the same address? Because I was on the E911 committee for a while, and the fire department would have a concern as to what's the address of the second house?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, that's something we'd have to
Yeah,
work out.
I mean, that's a big issue, I can tell you right now with the
Yeah,
fire
and that's
department.
obviously something that we would work out because we would want to make sure that the fire department and emergency people got to the right place. But that's, I think, something that could be determined if and when this variance is granted and the building permit is pulled. I would assume that that type of thing would be sorted out when the building permit is pulled.
I imagine it would be, but I just have a hard time setting
It's an
something up
interesting
for a
question.
problem. Anyway, but go ahead.
Please continue.
Right, so the second element, of course, is the spirit of the ordinance, and I think that's, as we know from New Hampshire case law, that's already covered under the public purpose, or whether it's contrary to the public interest. Then moving on to the third criteria, which is substantial justice, that is based upon a balancing of the, whether there's going to be a gain to the public in terms of denying the variance request as opposed to the loss to the individual applicant. And in this case, I think the answer is that there is no gain to the public if this variance were to be denied. As is presented in the materials here, the applicant has a variety of options in terms of what can go in other portions of this large 1.7 acre parcel. The applicant could, for example, put in a very large accessory structure, a barn or a garage or something like that, that could take up a fairly significant portion of that. That we've characterized it in the materials as we're calling the extension, but it's really it's the portion of the property that juts out into Ridgewood. So that could be occupied by a very, very large building. It could also, assuming, for example, that a special exception were to be granted, it could also be occupied by an accessory dwelling unit as well. So I think that to deny the request to have a second dwelling in that general location is not going to be a gain to the public, because something could, either as a matter of right or with a special exception, could go in there anywhere. We're simply looking to get something somewhat larger than what a special exception, what a accessory dwelling unit would be. The loss, by contrast to the applicant here, would be that they can't have a modestly sized dwelling with some degree of privacy in the location that they would like to, and which is going to be attractive to them too. And possibly to be used at a later point in time should they ever decide to condo it. Yeah, that's fine. In essence, this allows them to have the best use of this portion of their lot, and to have an effective use of space, both for themselves and for others who could more effectively get use of the larger building on the other portion of the property. With regard to the diminution in property, we again are talking about a single-family residence going in with other single-family residences. So there really isn't going to be any other diminution in value here. With regard to the hardship test, the special conditions of this property which make it unique is the size and the fact that it's got this odd configuration, this kind of T configuration, and also because it really is uniquely configured to accommodate a structure going in the very location that we're proposing to have it go in. The second criteria is whether or not there's a fair and substantial relationship which exists between the purpose, the public purpose of the ordinance, and the application of this provision to the property. And the answer is no. The purpose of the ordinance, again, is to prevent overcrowding on the land and/or additional population, excess additional population. There is really nothing that would suggest that putting a dwelling a little over 2,000 square feet on this area in conformance with setbacks and lot coverage and so forth would constitute overcrowding of the land. And in fact, we are even taking into account the existing square footage of the building right now and the addition of the proposed 2,000 square feet, we are would still be well under the building coverage requirement or what we would be allowed to do, which would be 18,000 square feet. So there is still going to be a tremendous amount of open space on the land, so that the purpose is really not going to be impacted at all. And the purpose, the purpose of the ordinance, the strict application of that really has nothing to do with the facts of the case at hand because of the large size of the lot and the fairly small addition of the square footage that we are proposing. Last is whether or not the proposed use is reasonable. As I just said, the lot is really big enough to accommodate the proposed use. And the alternatives, which I've outlined, and which can include large accessory structures as a matter of right, or with a special exception, an accessory dwelling unit, they can go in there already. So what we are proposing to do is really only slightly different than what we would be able to do under many other circumstances with, at most, a special exception. So with that, we ask that this board allow us to have a second dwelling unit as we propose, based upon the size that we have articulated here in the materials. And I'd be happy to answer any questions which the board may have, and certainly Roger can answer any questions.
Ms. Summers, are there any examples in the neighborhood of other two-family properties?
Not that I'm aware of. However, I would note that in the 2000, when the subdivision took place, which that was also in your supplemental materials. In 2000, there was a subdivision under the name of McGar.
That's when the garage was set out as a separate house.
Yes, well, I was just about to say that at that time, there were in fact two dwellings on that one lot. And that was subdivided off to create lot 11910. Excuse me, 119-1.
It wasn't a dwelling till after it was separated. It was a garage.
You would know better than I, but I'm looking at the plan right now, and it says garage apartment.
Yeah, it was built as a garage. There was an apartment above it.
Okay, but it was some fashion of a dwelling then.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, I am unaware of any in that particular neighborhood. I am aware of others farther down on High Street.
Yes.
But can I point to any right on Ridgewood Terrace?
Or
No.
in that immediate area. Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant or counsel?
Well,
Mr. Thielbar?
I'm still having trouble with this being essentially a resubmittal of what was essentially exactly the same request, but instead of asking for the forgiveness on the not having 100-foot, you've restructured the argument, but from a practical standpoint, it's exactly the same project that was rejected.
Well, I guess what I would say is that under the Fisher test, it's a material change in the proposed use. And I think we have met that test. Certainly, if you want to have further discussion about that, I guess we can. But to my mind, the test, the exact language for the test is whether or not there's a material change in the proposed use of the land. What we proposed to do earlier was to subdivide a portion of this lot, We are not proposing to do that here. And in order to subdivide that, it was a requirement that the frontage that we had be 100 feet. That was denied, and therefore that particular proposal went away. Now we are proposing to simply, instead of subdividing that lot with that 90 feet of frontage, which we recognize that application is dead, it's gone away. However, we are not proposing to do that. We are proposing instead to have one lot with two dwellings. That is a material change in the proposed use of the land.
Okay, but how would you argue that you have no hardship that requires you to request the house to be in that little offset when you have all the property behind the existing property that would be in a much more spacious location without crowding the neighborhood? Now, you were here when the first request was rejected.
Actually, I wasn't.
No, they were not represented by council at that meeting, but by
Okay.
a contractor or a...
But this place was full.
Right.
And I don't see anybody today.
I have read the minutes of those proceedings, yeah.
Sorry. I see you.
Yeah, I have read the proceedings of that. And I guess, and I'll let Roger speak to this in further detail. I guess what I would say is that, and I said this just a moment ago too, while the comments of the abutters back in 2019 are that they would enjoy looking out and seeing that open space and whatnot flanking their respective lots, that's not a given. I mean, that could change in a heartbeat if Roger decided he wanted to put a very large barn out there. And there is no right whatsoever that the abutters would have to prevent that. So I think that it's kind of an artificial notion to think that because the abutters currently have the ability to look out, and listen, Roger's going to do it right. He's going to landscape things and try to, create a sense of privacy both for himself and for the abutters. But this concept that the abutters can somehow have a predetermined right to forever be able to look out and see green space next to them is just a fallacy. It's simply not the case. Now, could Roger, and again, I'll let him speak to this further, but he has explored other options in terms of where a second dwelling could be, or even other alternative to doing this, and they're just not in play, which goes to the reasonableness of this request. I mean, for example, if he were to put a second dwelling on some other portion of the lot, that would most likely entail, I mean, there are topography issues and grade issues and that kind of thing, but that would probably entail chewing up a much larger portion of the lot in order to put in a driveway to service, because in order to get to the farther back in his lot, that's what would need to happen. If he were to try to put an addition onto his house and perhaps move into a portion of into the addition in a smaller area, we have discussed that, and that would be very challenging, both to try to marry the architecture of the existing house with an addition. And he just doesn't think that that's going to work and maintain the integrity of the house. He would also like to have, frankly, the privacy that's associated with a standalone dwelling. So, again, we did examine a couple of the other options. The ADU is not on the table because it's too small, and in the event that he ever does decide that he wants to condo something, he could not do that because an ADU is not eligible to be condoed. That's number one. The addition idea doesn't work. And then number three, if this board were to entertain the notion of a second dwelling unit on some other portion of the property, that would really not serve as much of anything in terms of maintaining some of the open space, because you'd have to put a driveway going back in a very difficult situation, probably behind the property of the Forsyth's house there, in order to get to the rear of the property. So from our perspective, we do believe that we satisfy the hardship criteria in terms of this being a special condition of the property, and that the proposed location of that is a very reasonable approach and a reasonable location.
Are there any further questions for the applicant? Hearing none, thank you. Ms. Summers, I'll ask any members of the public that would like to speak at this time to please.
And I'm also going to ask my client if he wants to add anything after the member.
That would be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. I'm Roger.
Well, why don't you?
Do you want to speak first, Matt?
No, let him.
What's that? Oh, go ahead.
I would suggest that the members
Yeah.
of the public speak first, and
Right,
then we have an
that's what I
opportunity
was
to
gonna say, yeah.
address anything that comes up. If you'd please state your name and your location and speak into the microphone.
Hi, I'm Matthew Forsyth. I live in I'm the southern neighbor. And I agree that it is, I think it's reasonable for a house to be there. I'm not going to reiterate any arguments that were, raised last time about wanting to look out at a green space or anything like that. Like, I understand that that's not really what you guys are concerned about. But I do have one concern, and that is that our house has severe water issues because of our position in the hill. Our sump pump is going 24/7. 3 weeks ago, we had standing water in our basement because it stopped. And the location where they're proposing to build a house is also collects water. So in order to build anything there, they'll have to build up, which will dump even more water in our house unless they do it a certain way. I know a lot about this just recently because the person the other neighbor of this property happens to be a structural engineer, so he's been kind of telling me a lot about it. He's not here, but anyway, what I would request is that if you guys do grant a variance of this nature, that since the proposed size of the house is being used as an argument in favor of it, if that can be an actual condition of the variance, that would be nice. The more important one is that if another condition of the variance could be that an actual runoff water plan is performed and signed off on by the neighbors, as a condition of the variance, that would set my mind a lot easier and probably prevent me from having to do some sort of engineering on my own property to mitigate the additional water that'll start coming onto my property. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Forsyth. I appreciate your thoughts. Seeing nobody else, members of the public here, I'll close the public session. And either Ms. Summers or the applicant, if you'd like to address this, please feel free to.
Yeah, hi. I mean, I know it sounds a lot like it did 2 years ago. In certain respects, it is. When we first moved in that house years ago, I mean, we had 3 kids living with us. It's a large home. It's a lot to take care of, et cetera. I have a business in town. I've been in town for over 20 years. I love living in Exeter and doing business in Exeter. And we really want to stay in Exeter, but really want to do it in a more modest way. And looking at the unique property that we have, it's kind of unfortunate. I think we did a little history lesson and looked back at how it was subdivided over the years. And unfortunately, not a lot of thought was put into how it was subdivided, which left us this 90 instead of 100 feet. If it had 100 feet, we wouldn't be here right now. It only has 90 feet. Other than that, we meet the 15,000 square feet, we meet the setbacks, we meet everything. In fact, I've been approached before, people not knowing the property, just saying, hey, you want to sell me that lot? I want to build on it. And I'm like, well, it's not really a conforming lot. And we recognize that, and we understand that's why we're here looking for a variance and an exception, is because we know at this point in time it's not buildable to the standards, the more modern standards that Exeter requires. Certainly in years past, there are plenty of houses within a stone's throw that are smaller than the lot we're talking about building on. However, those were grandfathered in. We don't have that fortune. And again, we want to stay in the area. It's Sue and I would be living there. There would be no one else living with us, and we just wanted an opportunity to say, hey, how can we do this? This seems, 10 feet is from where, where I'm standing to where you're sitting. And I'm like, this is, unusual, but we have to respect the law and try our best to see if there's a way we can get a variance to be able to continue living in Exeter on that, property, which we really enjoy.
Thank you.
Yep.
No decision made here this evening is going to prevent you from continuing to live in Exeter.
Well, there's not much available in Exeter.
I don't know.
He's moving.
I was just.
He's moving.
You're like Big Pocket Road now.
Mr. Chair, can I would like to have a little bit of a discussion about the proposed, issue that was raised by Mr. Forsyth. Is that something that, and I don't know quite how procedurally that we would handle this, whether we could perhaps table this meeting so that Roger could consider whether that would be a condition that would be amenable, or whether he's amenable to agreeing to that now. I don't know.
I have a feeling the way that this board would handle it, Ms. Summers, is to request, should a motion be made to approve the application for a variance, we would condition it on planning board approval. And I think that planning board would have to take a look, because that is way outside our purview.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm not so sure that the planning board would have jurisdiction, however, because it's not a multifamily.
No, but it is a new, they wouldn't have any?
Yeah.
Even with a new structure, would they?
No, because it's not a multifamily.
Well, yes, it is a multifamily.
No, it's not. No, and first of all, three homes is the cutoff.
It's a two-family, not a multifamily, yes.
But it isn't even that, and I guess that goes back to, Mr. Chair, if I could just have
Please.
sort of a question, because it goes back to, couldn't one of the conditions be that if we were to approve this, that simultaneously with this, that it is condominiumized? Because to me, I don't know what we're even creating here. And it goes with the land. You got principal dwelling, or is it a principal dwelling? Because one of the things talks about there should only be one principal dwelling on any piece of land. I read that, except when it's a hardship, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, this is just, I don't know what this is. It's like a camel or a drum. It's an oddball thing. So to me, I think it needs to have a definition.
Well, let me pose that question then to my client, is that...
That'd be fine with me. I mean, I think whether it's a family member living there or whatever, certainly it could be structured as a condominium, yes.
Right, but or is it a rental? Because then we get back into these conversations we've had about renting off pieces of property. So that's why I'm fixated a bit on this I'm saying condominium, but some kind of document that says what this is. These are two separate dwellings on a...
If it would provide the board a greater sense of comfort to treat this as a condominium with two detached condominium units, I think we'd be amenable to treating it that way.
I don't know if that's what we could...
I think the board has a lot of discussion to do before we even get there.
Okay, I just want to at least throw it out there to see what the feeling was.
At this stage of the game, I would say if there's something else that you would like to add before we move into deliberations. We've heard from the public and we've heard from the applicant. Is there anything that you want to add at this stage? I mean, we are going to be going through the 5 variance criteria. And just to telegraph my moves, I don't think that I think you should further address hardship.
I think I am actually, would like to have a moment just to discuss this with my client, because I'm thinking that perhaps what we would do is instead to table the proceedings to enable my client to speak with the neighbor first and then come back on these water issues, because this is the first I'm hearing of it.
I think...
And that may further the resolution of various items.
Are you asking to table, or do you want a just 5-minute break to discuss? Do you think it takes more than that?
I think I just like a 5-minute break, and then we can come back and determine whether or not I would request a tabling.
Are we okay with 5-minute break?
Sure.
Everyone, please.
Okay, thank you very much. an opportunity to table this matter tonight to allow my client to have some discussion with his neighbors, and then we will just request to reschedule it at a future time.
Do we need to take a motion on that? I think it's a good idea too. So the applicant has, would somebody like to make a motion to table this until the next meeting, please?
I move to table this matter until the next meeting.
That'll cover it. Second?
I second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you very much.
See you next month.
No.
We have one more, right?
We have two items of business still before us. The first, folks, is a request from Pearpoint Group LLC for an extension of case 18-24. Nothing about the application or the underlying conditions of the property has changed, with the exception of the passage of time, and a very weird time it's been. So I think it is perfectly reasonable for us to extend. It's requested for one additional year.
I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor of granting an extension for case 18-24 for one additional year, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. 5-0 on the extension, please. And finally is minutes from the last meeting. And I actually, while eating dinner this evening, read through them all, and I could find nothing
Oh, nothing.
on the October 19th. So let's see, it would be me, Rick, Chris, Ann, Esther, I guess you weren't here. So it'd be the four of us who would have any comments. Any comments, Ann, Rick, or Chris, about the October 19th minutes?
None for me. It's, she ought to put 2 or 3 mistakes
Just so we
in there.
find something.
It's no fun reading.
They call them Easter eggs, when you intentionally put something like that in.
Yeah.
There's no Easter eggs. She didn't give us anything. Joanna's too good at this stuff.
Don't give her any idea. It
Don't give her
doesn't
any
say
ideas.
Easter.
Oh, no!
You know that it doesn't say Easter on the back.
What was that?
Nope.
No, on the. Can I borrow this?
Water?
You're supposed to say Easter somewhere?
I hope it didn't break.
I don't think so.
Did it break?
Now it's fine.
Oh, I thought it said another
That
name.
thing falls all the time.
I thought it said Daniel.
Funny.
Mr. Chair, I'll give you a motion to accept the minutes of the October 19th meeting.
Second?
I second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor of accepting the minutes of the October 19th meeting as
Aye.
presented?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Chair votes aye. We got 4-0 on the minutes. Motion to adjourn.
So,
Seconded.
Me.
Aye.
Moved and seconded. In favor of adjournment? Aye.
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 We out of here.
Oh, thank you.
What time is it?
Yeah, 9.
Thank you.
At 9:30.
Oh, no. Okay.
What's it, past your bedtime?
Yes.
It's getting there.
Actually, I got a bunch of pills I'm supposed to take at a certain.
Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you